March 19th, the Grumblers. Luke chapter 15, verses 1 to 2 and 11 to 32. Now the tax collectors and sinners were drawing near to Jesus, and the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." And Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his field to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quickly, bring the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and as he drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he received him back safe and sound.' But he was angry, and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, 'Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him.' And he said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.'" The documentary was about a famous English composer. He was wonderfully talented. He was also an adulterer. A woman who knew him was interviewed and complained with some emotion. "Some people say blank wasn't a Christian, but of course he was. He was a charming man." This is make-believe Christianity. Creating your own brand of Christianity is by no means only a contemporary phenomenon. But Jesus does not accommodate himself to others in this way. That was what frustrated, irritated, and eventually angered so many of the Pharisees and scribes. He did not fit into their preconceived ideas of what the Christ should be. And worse, he freely associated with tax collectors and sinners, the great unclean and unwashed, who did not conform to the Pharisees' religious scruples. So the Pharisees and scribes grumbled, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them," verse 2. They had obviously never read the Hebrew Bible carefully. From its 3rd chapter onward, it tells the story of the God who receives sinners and eats with them. That was what the annual feasts of the Old Testament calendar were all about. How God receives sinners and eats with them. Thus they grumbled about Jesus. Being so self-assured that they were the only ones the Lord should be gracious to, it never crossed their minds that grumbling had been the national sin that had left rotting in the desert the corpses of their Exodus forefathers, who had failed to enter the promised land. Interestingly, food had been on their grumbling menu too. They complained that they no longer had the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic, nothing but all this manna. Numbers chapter 11, verses 5 and 6. They had despised the bread from heaven then, and their descendants were despising the bread from heaven still. John chapter 6, verses 33 to 35. What has this to do with the parable of the prodigal son in verses 11 to 32? It is the reason why Jesus told them, i.e. the Pharisees and scribes who grumbled, this three-part parable. Chapter 15, verse 3. In part 3 of this triptych, the prodigal is the younger of two sons. This isn't a parable about one lost son, but about two. So we shouldn't miss the point that while the prodigal son represents the tax collectors and sinners that Jesus received, the elder brother represents the Pharisees and scribes. Why is that important? Because many Christians are also recovering Pharisees. So in some respects, you may be more like the stay-at-home elder brother than the younger prodigal. True, you may have once been a father-despising, home-leaving rebel, returning to God from a pigsty in the far country. But perhaps not. Perhaps you have stayed at home in the church all your life. And yet in your relationship with the Lord there lurks in your heart an echo of the elder brother. All these years I've been slaving for you. Chapter 15, verse 29. Are you harbouring a deep-seated sense that being a Christian is being a slave, rather than being a son of the loving Father? Is there a remedy? Yes, the one that Jesus puts into the mouth of the Father in the parable, all that is mine is yours, verse 31. That is the joy of the gospel. God offers you everything that he has in his Son. His Son now says to you, give me all that is yours. Your sin, your shame, your suspicion of me, your fear of what following me will involve, give it all to me. Say to me, all that is mine is yours. And I will say to you, all that is mine is yours. Have you done that? It's time you did. Today's reflection. How do your attitudes and actions reveal whether you are slaving for God or living as a beloved child of God? This devotional series is being produced with the kind permission of the Good Book Company. A link to the book To Seek and to Save by Sinclair Ferguson can be found in the description below.